Another and the last edition, at least college football-wise, here of Beat the Closing Number, presented by TheLines.com. I'm Eli Herskovich, joined as always by Brett Gibbons at Road to CFB on X, previewing the national championship game of the college football playoff between the number 8 seed Ohio State Buckeyes, around 8.5 point favorites against the 7-seeded Notre Dame Fighting Irish, total between 46 and 46.5. Both markets have shifted around a bit, but Brett, you're ready to go. You have bets. You have plenty of bets, whether it's those markets or player props for this game. So excited to break it down with you, man.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think the word that always comes to mind this time of year is bittersweet. I'm watching my favorite team growing up play for a national championship. So that's very exciting. But once the confetti settles, we're without college football until August. So it's definitely a bittersweet time, to wish the season off. But I think it's been absolutely incredible thus far.
And maybe we'll save some look ahead, as in next season look ahead championship odds, if we want to jump to that at the tail end of this, just to kind of give people, if they're wanting something extra after this game, because if you're a diehard college football fan, how could you not? So, Brett, let's kick it off with the point spread here. Buckeyes opened around 9.5 point favorites, depending on the book, against the Irish after the semifinals wrapped up, icing it with the defensive touchdown against Texas to win by 2 scores. I would say, going back to our handicap of the semifinals, I thought we had a great handicap of both games, frankly, but Texas probably playing more toward underperforming against Arizona State and then playing to the level that they could have in that semifinal game. So undervalued in the semifinal game is what I'm referencing, despite losing by 2 touchdowns. I would argue initially on the surface here that the Buckeyes played in their national championship game, and this point spread maybe a little bit undervalued in the Buckeyes' direction. I'll get to my handicap in a bit, but how do you look at this spread on the onset?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when you consider how favorites have done recently, not even just in the pure, final total, it's how they've done against the spread. The favorites are overperforming. In the last 5 national championships, favorites are 5-0 against the spread. Not just that, but even if you take out that ridiculous Georgia 65-7 obliteration of TCU, you take that out, favorites are still covering the point spread by an average of 15 points per contest. And if you're looking at the winners of these games, you go back, Clemson beat up on Alabama, was it like 44-16 the year before, even though they were underdogs. So these games haven't been particularly close. So if you are, I guess, not to jump too far ahead, but if you are leaning the Ohio State side, it's probably not going to be a 9-point victory if they're going to, cover that point spread. It's probably going to be more in the range of double digits, just because that's how these games have played out. And like you said, they could be a touch undervalued just because people look at the Texas game and say, well, they were shut down. And we'll get into the personnel and whatnot, but I think Texas is specifically in the front 7 and their schemes. It was like playing a borderline, all rookie NFL all-star team that Ohio State did there. Not that they don't have one of their own. But yeah, I do think that we could have gotten a touch undervalued, because if Ohio State blows them out, is this above 10? Or, are we dealing with a 2-point swing in the evaluation of Ohio State based solely on how they played against Texas?
And you have a 2,500-word preview, not exaggerating, up at thelines.com as of Sunday night, with a bunch of different angles for this game that we'll discuss on this show. And I highly recommend checking out Brett's piece if you want more in-depth analysis on this matchup. So, Will Howard, I want to start there. We mentioned, okay, maybe you take a look at X angle if you like the Buckeyes alt spread, or you hit on it that Ohio State likelier to win by more than 10 points if they win this game, if they cover. Not going to be by just a 9-point margin. I was looking at it, I kind of, to your point, I don't want to get too far ahead either, but the argument of, in any sport, ahead of a championship series or a championship game, do you take the star player on that team to win MVP versus betting on that team as a whole? And Caesar Sportsbook, one of the best sports books out there, we highly recommend you checking out sportsbook promos across the board at the best sports betting sites, but for Caesars in particular over at thelines.com. Will Howard's MVP odds at Caesars plus 105. Would you make the case that if you like Ohio State, you may as well bet Will Howard at plus money over any alternate point spread? Because if you're looking at alternate spreads at DraftKings, for instance, those are the ones I have jotted down. Ohio State minus 8.5, around minus 110. Minus 13.5 plus 147, minus 16.5 plus 203, minus 20.5 plus 306. So you could argue if you like Ohio State to win by more than 2 touchdowns, take the alternate spread. If you like them to win by 10 or so, 2 possessions, you don't want to get even riskier than that. Maybe you bet Will Howard to win MVP. What say you?
Well, it's an interesting thought because you get if Ohio State's offense blows up and it's not just Jeremiah Smith and it's not just Emeka Egbuka or whoever, it's not just Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, kind of carrying the load on offense, you do get the benefit of the doubt that if it's a well-balanced offensive attack and they win by a lot, Will Howard's probably going to get the award. The other thing that you can get too is if it's a rock fight like we saw with Texas and Ohio State, barring another Jack Sawyer game-winning strip sack touchdown, you're probably going to get Will Howard as the MVP of that game too, especially if it's a really complete defensive performance from Ohio State. So if you're thinking that Ohio State's going to win this game, there is a number of ways that Will Howard comes out on top at plus 105. And I mean, yeah, it's better than betting Ohio State on the money line at minus 350, of course, if you just want them to win. So that does give you a little bit more of a cushion, even though it's not priced like it. Although you do have to keep in mind that if Jeremiah Smith goes nuclear, he's probably going to win it. If JT Tuimoloau goes in strip sacks and has a game-winning touchdown or whatever, he's probably going to win it. If either of the running backs go for $120 and 2, they'll probably win it. But I think there's more avenues for Howard to come away with that award than any other player on this team. Obviously, he's priced like it. But yeah, I do think that that's an interesting way you could go about it. I don't want to call it safe because it's higher odds, but I really do think that that's a pretty safe alternative if you're not super gung-ho on laying the points with Ohio State, but do think they could win, and you don't want to take 350 on the money line.
Not to give ourselves a pat on the back, but hopefully you, the listener, or you, the viewer, are in a good position betting on this one because we did recommend Ohio State ahead of the semifinal to win the college football playoff at minus 130. So not to toot our own horn, but pretty solid advice right there last week. So you were mentioning MVP odds across the border. You were alluding to it. Jeremiah Smith plus 250, Riley Leonard plus 450, Jeremiah Love plus 1,200, Trevion Henderson also that same price as Love. And onward, you can check out the best odds over at thelines.com. No defensive players listed, at least that I'm seeing. So the book, probably rightfully so, a little weary of putting anybody up there that's going to create a massive liability in the sense of Jack Sawyer clinching defensive touchdown. You don't want to have that being the reason why X book loses on an MVP prop that most books don't have up in the first place, or an MVP market. Notre Dame's defense. So we've touched on Ohio State, both sides of the ball to an extent. I've hit on this on a few shows that we've done together, handicapping college football playoff odds, not just or across the regular season as well. In Notre Dame's last 13 games, they have in 11 of them, they have a plus turnover differential, and in 2 of them, they're even. So they have not been down in the turnover department in their last 13 games across the board. How sustainable is that? When you look at the track record over 13 games, it's sustainable. But I have made the case almost every week that what if turnover luck goes against Notre Dame? I think you have to bring up this. I mean, I'm very willing to bring up the same argument here that this is the spot that Notre Dame's turnover luck could go awry, no?
Yeah, it definitely could, but this is the national championship game, so let's get in the weeds. I don't care about getting too far in the weeds in this game. I don't think you can get too granular when breaking it down. And Ohio State's team I know best of any of them in the country, and there is a very specific route in which Notre Dame can still win the turnover battle here in a way that is slightly predictable. We saw in the semifinals Texas take the anti-Patrick Mahomes and anti-Tyreek Hill, prime Kansas City Chiefs defense of too high You are throwing everything underneath, and we're going to force you to take what the defense is going to give them. And unfortunately, Will Howard, and even to an extent Chip Kelly with the play calling, would not accept that. And that's why they only came away with 21 offensive points, all of which coming from running backs, is because Will Howard wasn't consistently taking what the defense was giving him. Now, Carnell Tate came away with 7 receptions, and he was a benefactor of the too high, and Jeremiah Smith kind of taking those away so he could come up underneath. But we saw Will Howard make a couple of bad throws because he was forcing the ball downfield to throws that weren't there. And with Xavier Watts back there, 2-time All-American, 13 interceptions in the past 2 years, mind you. That's an insane number. I don't know if it's necessarily luck variance in this game, and more so, is Will Howard willing to compromise his guy's stats and his own stats to win the football game? Because if he's taking 8, 9, 10 yards underneath every time, ball game's over. There's nothing Notre Dame's going to do about it, and Ohio State's going to score a bunch of points. But the problem is, I've seen Will Howard get too aggressive, and it's in my preview coming out soon. I titled the section Hero Ball. He cannot play Hero Ball. He can't be, I'm going to win this game by myself on my right shoulder and force this ball downfield, because Xavier Watts and the number one pass defense in the country is absolutely going to make him pay. So when you're talking about the variance of turnover luck, I do think that there is a player-specific and a scheme-specific factor in which Notre Dame could force turnovers. Now, Will Howard might come out the first couple of series and say, hey, JJ, I'm sorry. Like, you've been phenomenal all year. 1 catch for 3 yards. We still came away with the win. We're here to win a national championship game, not win a fantasy football championship and take what's given underneath. And in that case, yeah, Notre Dame's not going to get many, if any, turnovers at all besides the complete turnover luck, a tip ball, a fumble that skirts one way or another. But I do think that there is a route in which Notre Dame can cause some havoc, steal possessions, and take the ball away from Will Howard, because he's potentially, because I saw it in the semifinals, potentially unwilling just to give him what the defense is giving him.
Will Howard to throw an interception at Caesars, -121. No picks, -113. Riley Leonard on the flip side, -174 to throw a pick. So odds on favorite in a sense. And +126, no interceptions. I want to touch on Leonard here, and we can continue to talk about Ohio State's offense, but just for the sake of breaking this up a little bit, I'm sure we're going to get Notre Dame fans and those who think Notre Dame can win the game to say, okay, why haven't you handicapped Riley Leonard yet in this Notre Dame offense? And to be fair, they have a point. So Leonard is an interesting handicap individually for me in this game, because you look at his splits and he is better when opponents blitz, but he isn't pressured, as in when Notre Dame can protect up front, because he's better against man coverage. To your point about how does Leonard or Howard fare against a too high safety look, Leonard is better against man coverage, and even when he's blitzed, if he has a couple seconds, if he has protection, he usually can make those throws. But Ohio State doesn't blitz much. You brought that up on a bunch of different shows. Yet they rank 3rd nationally with a 40.9% pressure rate. This is a game, and yes, the odds are pretty juiced in a negative sense, so maybe not so valuable on the surface. Or better saying, why would I lay 74 cents on Leonard to throw a pick? I would probably lay the -174 on Leonard to throw an interception in this game.
Well, I probably won't be going the other way, and there's a lot to unpack with this side. The other side with Will Howard was very much will he or won't he. This one has a lot of layers. So number one, I think Riley Leonard's statistical performance against the blitz is because Notre Dame played a lot of overmatched teams this year. That's like, well, the only way we're going to win this game is by causing havoc, so we're just going to send the house, hope Leonard can beat us, and then they're leaving, corners on an island with, Notre Dame doesn't have all-star receivers like Ohio State does, but they're good enough to win against subpar competition. And that's not a slight at Notre Dame by any stretch, because there's another facet to this, and that's because Riley Leonard is so darn mobile and so good at keeping his eyes downfield and still completing passes late and near the line of scrimmage when he's running. That's the other reason why I think that he's very good against man, because it's really, really hard to play man coverage against a receiver that's running around for 5-6 seconds, because Riley Leonard is causing that to happen. Someone's going to come free. So I do think that it's a kind of a dual thing there. Now, where I think Leonard's pick propensity could come in and will come in is because the offensive line for Notre Dame has been pretty good getting a push, but they've had some pass protection issues. Riley Leonard has been pressured 43 times and sacked 6 times. Now that's a testament to his mobility and escapability in the college football playoff right now. Plus, left tackle Anthony Knapp is out this game. He sprained his ankle in the last game, and he's been their starting left tackle all year. Now, interestingly, I believe he's a redshirt freshman, might still be a redshirt freshman after this year. Charles Jagasaw, he's questionable. He was listed as OR on the depth chart despite missing the entire season. He went out with a shoulder meniscus tear early on, then he was done for the whole season, but because they're in mid-January, he's recovered enough to potentially play, and he was supposed to be the preseason starting left tackle, so he could get in there, and that could be an ample replacement for Knapp there, but I don't know, man. It's a redshirt freshman that hasn't played very much, and you're going up against 2 of the best pass rushers in the entire country. So I think that if you're seeing Riley Leonard take on the pressure, and Ohio State's pressured opposing quarterbacks, mind you, in just 3 games, 52 times, and they've gotten 16 sacks. Jack Sawyer's batted down a bunch of balls at the line of scrimmage. I think that's where the propensity for Leonard to throw an interception comes in. So yes, I do believe. I would not be betting the opposite way. I wouldn't be betting, no, he's going to stay clean. If he does, Notre Dame's going to win this game. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I do think that there will be a mistake somewhere, and I think it could be from the ferocious pass rush more so than he doesn't see Downs back there jumping in and snagging a pick or whatever with zone coverage.
Another angle, and you touched on this, by the way, great injury notes in your article as well, full handicap, 2,500 words on the national championship game. Wrote a little bit about Marcus Freeman, and I'm looking at this behind the curtain, essentially, because it's not out yet as we're recording here on Friday, but by the time this video and podcast is out, you should have it up at thelines.com to read at your leisure. So Marcus Freeman, and ever since Freeman took over as the Notre Dame head coach, for he who shall not be named. Notre Dame has the best ATS record in college football.
Different team.
Right.
They're a different team.
How much do you think that matters in this game? You could say, okay, maybe the line is a little bit deflated in Ohio State's direction as a result because the market is overvaluing how Notre Dame plays as a dog and Notre Dame's against the spread record success. I faded Notre Dame against Indiana. That was the last time I was doing it up until this game, potentially. I'm sure we're going to have listeners and viewers leave in the podcast because they don't want to hear that. But hey, bettors lose sometimes. It happens. Deal with it. I'm sure you have lost your fair share of bets.
A few.
Bro,
Yeah, a couple. Yeah.
Not you.
From
Not
time
you,
to time.
Brett. We're both honest. The viewers and listeners are not. But with Marcus Freeman, how much of an impact does that make for you handicapping this game? Just their ability to keep and stay within the number.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be silly to say not at all. I do have to give a hat tip here. Brad Powers is the one that compiled this and put it on Twitter. That's where I saw it. But Notre Dame is currently outscoring opponents 148-17 in the middle 8. That has to do with coaching. That's a lot of, hey, I understand where we're at in the game and what this what this means for the rest of the game. We need to score before half, get the ball back, and score again. And we saw that against Georgia, and that ended up winning the game, right? So how this team performs in that middle 8 is really super important. I do think that comes down to Marcus Freeman being aggressive but not reckless. We saw, he's got a fastball, and we saw that when he did the kind of fire drill when he was pulling the punt team off against Georgia. Not many times in the past few years have we seen Kirby Smart with his pants around his ankles, and that was one of them right there where they got the first down and bled 5 more minutes off of the clock to eventually beat them. On the other side, if we're comparing, apples to apples, Ryan Day just simply has to coach like he's an underdog. That's when he's at his best. When Ohio State plays disrespected, and not just this year, but like through the Urban Meyer years and the Jim Tressel years, it's when they've been an underdog is when they played their best. And unfortunately, they're not much of an underdog in this game here. But I think a little talked about note that I haven't really seen in a lot of breakdowns of this. Ryan Day's been here before. We can say he got boat raced by that Alabama team, one of the better rosters that's ever been compiled on a college football field. Ohio State lost that game, weird COVID year, but he's been in this stage. He's been to the playoff multiple times. He's won and lost multiple playoff games, in multiple different ways. He is coaching with more expectation. That, as an Ohio State fan, worries me quite a bit. I don't like when there's expectation on his shoulders there, but I mean, it's just... he has to understand that Marcus Freeman standing across the field from him leaves so little room for error that you just have to coach as aggressively as you did against Tennessee and Oregon and even Texas. Even though it didn't really pan out how they wanted to, they still coached really aggressively, knowing that, hey, my season's over. And, in the Tennessee game, potentially my job is over from Day's perspective. But we need to see the same kind of aggressive attacking approach that doesn't allow Notre Dame to collect their feet under them and hopefully get that flash fry bit in there if you're an Ohio State backer.
With Freeman's against the spread numbers here, digging into a little bit more, 20-8 against quote-unquote winning college football programs. So
that's pretty good.
Do they have a pretty damn good? Do they have a straight up winning record or not? You go back to the bowl game last year, and then throughout this season, he's been dominant and then some, with Notre Dame only having that one loss to Northern Illinois. So as much as you may say, how much does Freeman's impact, or how much can a coach impact this game when Ohio State has the lethal offense that it does? And that's the next point that I want to bring up. And to answer that short question, it does, as you hit on. Joe Burrow and the LSU Tigers. I made this comparison last week to when the market adjusted the Ohio State-Texas point spread from the look-ahead line around 4 points off the look-ahead odds, where Ohio State was around a 2.5-point favorite against Texas on the look-ahead number in the quarterfinal. Then once the semifinal number point spread reopened, it was Ohio State minus 6.5. And I think the sharpest book out there, Circa Sports, was hanging a 6.5 on open. Is this Ohio State offense? We saw them struggle last week. You mentioned Will Howard not being able to adjust in game to what Texas was presenting defensively, taking away the big play. Is Ohio State, did that maybe make you a little wary? You not only mentioned of Ryan Day coaching in big games, but Ohio State's ability to live up to the market's expectation. So we've handicapped both sides of the ball here, but does that give you a little bit of pause with Ohio State's inability to adjust in game and how good this Notre Dame's defense is, despite Penn State causing a little bit of regression last week?
Well, I don't know if it was necessarily an inability to adjust in game, because I think they did. I just think Texas's defense was simply that good that they were able to counter kind of whatever Ohio State threw at them. A perfect case in point is Texas was bearing down and loading the box all first half. What was the final play of the half? A screen pass to Trevion Henderson, get him out in space, 75 yards to the house, which would ultimately be the difference in the game. I know that Ohio State won by 2 scores, but that is
lucky.
Sure, but that is one of the differences in the game there. Ohio State did adjust. They tried different things. The thing is that Texas was so stout, especially in the front seven, and they didn't have any injuries. I mean, that's a healthy team that they beat. You're going against a front seven here that has a lot of absences. They've still got a lot of really good players. RJ Oben's been phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal in the postseason here. And he's a big-time threat, but Ohio State's reshuffled offensive line has been able to, for the most part, neutralize. And if they're able to go in and, again, I've used this a million times, take what Notre Dame has been giving them, and that's an ability to adjust on the fly, you can run the ball in Notre Dame like you could not run the ball in Texas. Notre Dame's 90th in success rate allowed against running games, and we're talking 2 of the best premier backs, the best backfield tandem in the country, and 2 premier backs. Do you just run it at them? Can you get 6-7 yards of play? Probably, if they test that. So in terms of the adjustment during the game, Ohio State can do it and was doing it, both offensively and defensively, because we had Texas running those wheel route, rail routes, whatever you want to call them, out of the backfield for a couple of scores. Ohio State did end up covering that, and that was no longer an option for them. So I don't know. It's not like Michigan where we weren't seeing those in-game adjustments. They were just running their head into a brick wall 150 times. They did make adjustments. Just Texas defense really was that good to be able to stop them on that. So I think I might have lost the plot to your question here, but
no, but it was a great answer. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I think they will be able to adjust and be able to move the ball in different ways against Notre Dame that they weren't able to on Texas.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought up running backs, because that's where I wanted to go next, looking at the prop market here on both sides for both offenses. You look at where Trevion Henderson is lined at over under 155 rushing yards. Judkins at 157 or 57, I should say. He's not.
Wow. I was going to say that's 300 combined yards. Yeah, I'll take under.
Clearly the alt spread is in play on Caesar Sports. Minus money, not plus money on Ohio State to win by a few scores. Just kidding. So you go back to the Texas result. They combined for 78 rushing yards. Yeah. So A, how do you handicap Ohio State's backfield? And B, how do you handicap Jeremiah Love and his rushing yards prop? He had 11 carries for 46 and a touchdown against Penn State, but his health, not necessarily in question whether he's going to play, but snap count wise, carries wise, where is he going to be at? His rushing yards prop for the game is 44.5.
Yeah, I mean, he suffered a couple of re-injuries to the same injury in the first couple of games in the college football playoff, but then he went against Penn State and didn't seem to be affected at all. Now, he's been a 10, 11 carry guy all season, so, do they run him if they can? I don't know if they're going to be able to on the Notre Dame side. Jeremiah, he had the 98-yard touchdown, which was explosive. He had that unbelievable, unthinkable touchdown run for only a couple of yards against Penn State, but a all-time individual effort. That goes up in coaching locker rooms for the rest of all time. But other than that, I mean, just hasn't really been all that effective. You take away his 98-yard touchdown run against Indiana, he was 7 for 10, 6 for 19 against Georgia. I know he got
That's
a
why
little
I
bit
think
banged
he's
up
still
there.
Still hurt.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's not too far. He's very hot and cold. You go look at his season long. Against Purdue, he ran for 10.9 a carry. Duh. Against A&M, 6.5 a carry, which was really, really solid. Louisville, 3.1. Georgia Tech, 2.6. Florida State, 2.1. He's not a consistently dominant player. There's flashes of greatness, and he's young, so he'll come back and next year be one of the premier backs in college football. But he's very hot and cold, and when he goes up against a defense that knows what they're doing against the run, he doesn't do as well. And Ohio State held Texas 9 of their rushes, of their 25 total rushes. That's about 36%, went for 2 yards or less. Against Oregon, which is less of a gap scheme, less of a vertical scheme, more of a zone, 14 of 20 went for 2 or fewer yards. I mean, 70% of rushes getting stopped for 2 or fewer yards. Ohio State's defense has just been phenomenal. And because they have those outstanding athletes at every single level, including their safeties, Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom, who are both amazing against the run, you don't have to stack boxes to stop the run anymore. You can line up in whatever you want and still be able to fit the run because Lathan Ransom's able to play on your number 3 and still make a TFL or a stop at the line of scrimmage. So I think Notre Dame's going to struggle to run the ball here, as good as their offensive line has been. I think if you're going to be getting rushing production from anywhere, it's going to be from Riley Leonard, because we saw Nico in the Tennessee game be able to kind of gash them time and time again. But if that's where you're falling to, that's your only offense, is just can Riley Leonard run for 13 yards a couple of times, they're probably in trouble offensively. But on the other side, there's less to say. It's just it's 2 premier backs that are probably all league level if they weren't offsetting each other, and you have Quinshon Judkins who's going to run right through your face mask, if you get in his way, and Trevion Henderson that'll run right past you at track speed. And it's really, really hard for a defense, especially one that is banged up and is missing starters like Notre Dame's, up front. It's very difficult to finally say, all right, we've stopped Judkins. Then he comes out of the game and Trevion Henderson comes in with fresh legs. And it's just a very difficult thing to go against. And reshuffled or not, that Ohio State offensive line has been phenomenal blocking in both the pass and the run.
He made up for I'm talking about Henderson, his 15-yard penalty in the first half against Texas with that.
And then some. Yeah.
Yeah. And he took care of my first half Texas bet pretty quickly. That I didn't say on the show, but I'm more than happy to discuss my losers. I thought Texas first half plus 3.5 was dead. They score, you mentioned, on one of their wheel route touchdowns to close out the first half, and then Henderson houses my Texas bet into the trash. Ohio State receiving props are more interesting. Maybe some Notre Dame bettors will say otherwise, but I think it's pretty clear cut that if you're handicapping this game from a neutral standpoint, Ohio State receiving props is what you want to target here because of Leonard's potential inconsistencies that he's already shown in the college football playoff. Jeremiah Smith, you look at receiving yards, and he only had one catch for 3 yards against Texas, because they not only decided to take away the big play, but they had the safety over the top on him on more than half of his routes and then some. His receiving yards prop is lined at 79.5 here. Emeka Ibuka, 57.5, and then Carnell Tate, who led Ohio State in receiving against Texas, over under 40.5. Before the show, I was looking up how Ohio State's receivers fare against man versus zone coverage in terms of yards per route run. Jeremiah Smith heads above heels Tate and Ibuka. Tate is a little bit more effective by a hair against zone coverage, and Ibuka is more efficient against man, and then, like I said, a little bit less efficient against zone. So among those three receivers, how would you bet any of their props, and do you potentially like a long shot bet on one of them to lead the game in receiving yards?
I don't know if it's necessarily a long shot, but we're at about the 30-minute mark here in the show, so I'll give out one of my bets here, and that is Emeka Ibuka to lead Ohio State, to be the game leader in receiving yards at plus 280. I do like that one there. I used a little bit of a boost on it. I believe it was over at Caesars. That give you a little boost DraftKings Sportsbook plus 280 found it. It gives you a boost for that. Figured I'd use it on that. I do like that because in the off chance that, if you do play that too high right now, there's really just not much room for Jeremiah Smith, and so now you're looking for other options. And Carnell Tate was awesome against Texas. You can actually find his over-under on receptions. I wouldn't really go yards because that's more of a wild card, but receptions, 3.5. I'm seeing it at plus 114 at FanDuel Sportsbook. It seems to be the best price out there. I would look over on that as well. And those are bets that you're going to know how they're going to go, like, right out of the gate in, like, for Ohio State's first offensive series, because you're going to see if Notre Dame tries that too high, force everything underneath. And if that's the case, Carnell Tate's going to see a lot of receptions. Tight end G. Scott's going to see a lot of receptions. And, this is a championship game. So who are they going to go to? A player that's played Notre Dame now. This will be his third time already, and one of the more reliable, second receivers in the country, if not the best second option in Emeka Ibuka. So that's why I like that. Taking it plus 280, I think it's a little bit undervalued to consider that. Hey, what if Notre Dame does end up taking away Jeremiah Smith? Then Will Howard's going to look to the second best receiver on the team in Emeka Ibuka. So he did lead. Carnell Tate still led against Texas, but if I'm betting who's going to have more yards in Carnell Tate and Emeka Ibuka, I'm taking Emeka Ibuka the whole time. Of course, you do have what if somebody on Notre Dame goes off? But I have yet to see that.
If you head over to thelines.com/betting, you can sign up for DraftKings Sportsbook, bet on Ibuka to lead the game in receiving yards, both teams, obviously, and there's no code needed, but just click play now to do so. And if you want to sign up at Caesars Sportsbook, it's the promo code THELINES, DYW. You bet $1, double your winnings on your next 10 wagers. And then over at BetMGM, using promo code THELINES, up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. So that means if you bet a $1,500 bet on the national championship game or $100, whatever it may be, it loses, you get that amount back in bonus bets. If it wins, take your winnings, be happy, because betting on a game like this where the market is pretty much settled in correctly, like that's why you hear, and Brett's doing it, a lot of sharp bettors bet on player props versus betting on the point spread, or at least the standard pregame line and standard pregame total. On that note, we haven't touched on the total for this game yet, and it's anywhere between 46 and a half. It's been bet up in the back half of this week leading up to the national championship game kicking off on Monday night, January 20th. What's your handicap at the total?
High variance, that's for sure. There's a world in which Ohio State comes out and covers 80% of this on their own, and there's a world that it comes out and the final score is 20-13. I'm not interested in betting this straight total at all. I didn't see any value in the halves. Just again, it's such a cop out just to say, but like you could probably bet it live. It just depends. Is Ohio State going to come out and Notre Dame's not going to bracket or try to take away the explosives and try to man up the guy? I doubt it. But, do we see a quick touchdown early on and it's opens the floodgates from there? Or is it just Stonewall and the number one pass defense shows up and shuts down the most talented receiving core in the country and forces Ohio State to run the ball quite a bit? I really don't have a feel on this game. I've said it a couple of times on the show before. I'm not a huge totals bettor just because I have not found a ton of success in that market personally, but I just see it going so many different ways in which this bet could be completely dead by halftime, but another world in which you're sweating out, 17-10 in the fourth quarter.
Is there any part of you that thinks, because let's just say, to my point earlier on, it may come out that Ohio State and Notre Dame both put up a ton of points and it doesn't matter. But let's say Notre Dame's defense is more vulnerable than the numbers appear to be because of turnover variance, and Ohio State puts up any number that it would like, has success through the air, but Notre Dame is able to run the ball efficiently. Is there any part of you that thinks that script can happen in terms of Notre Dame controlling the clock to an extent, like Texas did, maybe not on the ground, but still, Texas was able to navigate that game to an extent the way they wanted it to, keeping Ohio State on the sideline and making Ohio State's offense uncomfortable. So I'm just purely handicapping it from a Notre Dame offensive standpoint. Maybe Ohio State's offense has success against Notre Dame's defense, but Notre Dame controls the clock because of its ground game. Is that a plausible script in your eyes, or do you think Ohio State's run defense is too dominant?
It's not just plausible. It's probably, if you're talking about ways for Notre Dame to win, it's definitely the more likely of the two situations other than just purely outscoring Ohio State. That's their path to win, and I can almost guarantee you that's their game plan going in, is to drag Ohio State down to play their physical game. They bottle up explosive passes. They take advantage of that middle eight and force Will Howard to make mistakes because he's getting too aggressive downfield because there's just nothing there. They're the number one pass defense in the country. Texas was at the 1 yard line with a chance to tie the game. And that is something you do have to consider as Ohio State's red zone defense, because it wasn't just an outlier against Texas. They did it against Penn State to win the game too, a semifinalist team. So this is something Ohio State can and will do.
Bad play calling in for both of those teams, Penn State and Texas, but I digress.
Yeah, well, every team falls victim to it's a late down and short, and I'm going to run the ball horizontally to the line. But I think that, yes, but I do think it's a little results-oriented just because Caleb Downs is one of four, not just safeties, but four players in all of college football making that stop 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And then Texas isn't facing 3rd and goal from the 7. They're facing 3rd and goal from the 4, and that's a lot more manageable. So I disagree with the running horizontally on a short yardage just because philosophically that's dumb. But I do think that it is a little bit of, Caleb Downs was able to turn Super Saiyan and blow that, play up himself. But going back to the pace, yeah, there's definitely a way that Notre Dame goes in there, mucks it up, takes Ohio State out of its rhythm. And we see when Ohio State's out of its rhythm, ugly things can happen. Penn State, Michigan, of course, Texas, it's very apparent early on, and you can kind of see the panic in the Ohio State offense of nothing's working, we're forcing the ball downfield, it's not going anywhere. And that is what Notre Dame's going to try to do, because otherwise they're not going to win the game. There's no other path for Notre Dame to win this game than to drag Ohio State down, get it out of its rhythm offensively, and beat them up physically, and hope that Riley Leonard can make 1 or 2 plays rather than 5 to 10 plays.
That's why the more I think about this, the more I probably like the under a little more than any alternate spread even. Like we said, the market is pretty efficient at this point of the season. I'm not touching the pregame point spreads. If you want to take an all pregame point spread, do as you wish. But I think under 46 is worth a look. Intuition-wise, I'm not saying Ohio State won't score, but I think there's a likelier chance that Will Howard is a little tighter than not to begin this game. I would probably have more confidence if Notre Dame, if I see from the get-go that they can run the football, because if not, and Notre Dame gets into a negative game script, you can have as little as confidence as you want in Riley Leonard, but that would make me a little wary of having an under ticket if Notre Dame is down from behind in this game and then Ohio State is just in a track meet per se to just score on their ensuing possession. But long story short, I think I'm going to fire a bet on the under 46 here.
And that's, obviously, if you're just talking about just purely over and betting overs and betting unders, that's the sharper of the side. And this is probably why I'm bad at betting the totals. But it just, when I start to think about potential outcomes for this game, 28-21 over, 31-17 over. Like, these are not high scoring games. 27-24 over. These are not high scoring games, and I think that's what gives me a little bit pause on here, because I don't think there's a lot of worlds in which Ohio State's held under 20. They're not going to be held to teens or single digits. And Notre Dame might be, but I think if Notre Dame's being held to extremely low scoring under 20 points, I think Ohio State's going to be able to score 28 or more. And, for Notre Dame to beat Ohio State, they have to score 27 points, in my opinion. That is the mark that you absolutely have to score, or you are just not going to win. Cut and dry. So that's where I kind of fall into I don't know if I really want to bet anything on the total, just because I do think that's, it's the championship game. Of course, it's been win or go home for the past several weeks, but this is truly, you leave everything out on that field no matter what, and we're going to continue to score and try as hard as we can to score the football, and that's why I take a little bit of pause, because you do see these championship games, they just haven't been that low scoring. Last year's would have been under, I believe. It was 34-13. No, if you get the 47.5, if there's a straight one out there, I mean, these championship games are typically a little bit higher scoring.
Georgia TCU, though, if you want to go back, a couple years ago, that was a TCU defense or a TCU team that was bound to regress. Yeah, and it did on both sides of the ball. Total probably still should have. I'm trying to remember if I bet a live under in that game or pregame under. Either way, it lost. But that was a game where the total probably should have gone under based on what Georgia was doing to control the clock. They just scored essentially every time they touched the football.
Yeah, I don't even take that game into account. The only thing that I do take into account for is that I do remember the spread moved so drastically, so close to kickoff. It was 13.5 all week, and it ticked up to 14.5, and then by kickoff it was like 17, which, that's insane. It was the last hour or two, just skyrocketed. So that's really the only thing that I ever take from the 22 championship series is, if you're watching these lines and all of a sudden you see a spike right before kickoff, and that's, with most sports betting, but especially in these championship games, if you see a movement like that, it's like, oh boy, if you're on the TCU side, you're done. It's over before the ball's even kicked off.
Right. Late movement in a market, you're getting sharp money late. Theoretically, I mean, just the day of game, that's when you're typically allowed to bet more at a given sports book.
Right,
so.
but the alarming thing about 22 is the championship game is, correct me if I'm wrong here, probably as sharp a market as an NFL market, just because so many eyes are on it.
I would argue every championship series or game, to an extent, that's when the market is most efficient.
Yeah, but then you see, the market should be super efficient, and it still moved 3.5 points an hour before. That's the alarming thing about that. Everything about 22 was an outlier, but that's why I usually remove it from most data collection sources when talking about this kind of stuff, just because, that's probably not going to happen again.
All right, so I'm going to leave you with this. Any other notes you want to share, or do you want to get to our best bets?
I want to talk about one player from each side, because I always feel like in these championship games, it is the stars that shine the brightest, but there's always one or two kind of tertiary players that really steps up and makes a difference, and I want to give one from each team. Number one being safety Lathan Ransom from Ohio State. He is as effective in the run game as a safety gets. I think he'd be getting a lot more attention if Caleb Downs wasn't playing opposite of him. I do believe that they're the best safety tandem in all of college football. And Lathan Ransom is going to have to D up against Mitchell Evans, big tight end. Notre Dame's just a factory of producing these kind of guys. But Mitchell Evans is the leading receiver this postseason. I think Lathan Ransom is going to have a tough assignment there. The other one I want to bring up too is on the other side, and this is a little bit conditional. Currently, Bo Collins, the leading receiver, is questionable with a calf injury. He may not play. Whether he does or doesn't, he may not be at full speed. Jaden Greathouse, I'd be remiss if I didn't finish this whole 45 minutes talking about Notre Dame without mentioning Jaden Greathouse. He had a long touchdown against Penn State. Outside of that, went 6 for 51. Ohio State's corners are a little bit vulnerable at times. We've seen that. Denzel Burke is a little bit beat up. He's going to play, but he hasn't really been all that good this year either. I do believe that there's a point in the game where Notre Dame needs an explosive through the passing game. Jaden Greathouse is probably going to be the guy to do it. So I just wanted to mention Lathan Ransom for Ohio State as a safety, and then Notre Dame wide receiver Jaden Greathouse. Those two could potentially be game-altering tertiary players.
Great information. Be sure to check out Brett's betting guide over at thelines.com. Best bet time. Under for me is where I'm going. Under 46. I think the most likely scenario in this game. Listen, I came into the podcast having the option of looking to the total. It wasn't necessarily crossed off my list, but I was actually considering a double result, which I still don't hate. So Notre Dame first half and then Ohio State second half at plus 625 at Caesars, which I may sprinkle on before kick regardless. But I'm still going to take the under. I may wait a little bit. As we're recording this, I'm seeing VIG toward the under at most books, and I think we could see either late money, as in the day of the game, or Sunday night. Maybe I get a flat 46 or even a flat 46.5. I would love. Not necessarily a key number, but you're obviously trying to get the most value in any wager that you could possibly get. So I think Notre Dame is going to have some semblance of success on the ground, play a bit of ball control. I get your point about Ohio State more than likely scoring 27 plus points in this game. But if Notre Dame plays at the pace and style that it wants to and dictates this game to an extent, I trust Notre Dame's ground game a hell of a whole lot more than I do Texas. And I think we're both in agreement that they can have more success on the ground than Texas did, despite Ohio State's defensive dominance up front. Maybe you disagree. But
I would invite you to go back and watch a little bit more Trey Wishner, but yeah, sure.
Fair enough. I'll take the under in this game, 46 or 46.5. Be sure to price shop over at thelines.com. Brett, what about you?
Yeah, I do like your double result there. The nice thing about that bet is you'll know instantly if that is going to even have an option or not, just because of the way Ohio State can start these games. Yeah, because, if it's a loser, you could just say, all right, move on and enjoy the game instead of sweating it out. So for me, I had mentioned Emeka Egbuka to lead the game in receiving at plus 280 at DraftKings. I do like that. They're offering a little bit of a boost over there if you wanted to apply it. Doesn't go for much, but, any sort of odds boost you can get is always good, of course. And then I'm also taking a little bit of a flyer on Ohio State to win specifically by 13 to 18 points. That's plus 450 offer at BetMGM, and they're offering a no sweat bet over there. So you can get it back in bonus bets if it loses. So I kind of like taking those a little bit longer odds on that one just because, it's not, they're not giving you back $500 if that's what your unit is. So, just taking a little bit of a flyer on that. The reason behind the bracket of those two is because I go back to how the favorites have performed in the past 5. They've won handily, even in relation to the point spread. You take out that Georgia TCU result, and favorites are still outperforming their line by 15 points per game. Therefore, I like Ohio State to win by a couple of scores in this game as well. And if we're given like official predictions that are just not bets, but where I stand over on this game, I do think Ohio State wins this game somewhere in the ballpark of a 31-17 final. I just think their offense has so many different ways to win. And, like you said before, that Texas game we may look back on and say that was really Ohio State's toughest task at hand just because of how good the run defense is. I don't think Notre Dame's run defense is going to be able to bottle up both Judkins and Henderson.
Can you change that prediction to 31-14?
For what purpose?
For my under.
Sure, 31-14, because that's still in the bracket of 13 to 18 points. Sure.
There we go. Then we both win, and you cash your long shot or somewhat of a long shot bet. No sweat bet over at BetMGM. I appreciate the willingness to do so there, Brett. And not to leave this to the very end, some exciting news for Brett individually. Now for you, the listener.
Yeah, no, this
viewer,
is just exciting for me.
But Brett, an Ohio State diehard, will be traveling to the game. So if you want to take a few minutes here, take a couple minutes to share your plans here for the next 24 hours when the listener or viewer is consuming this.
Yeah, really excited. I do have family down in Atlanta that I'm also going to visit as well, but it's going to be really quick, in Sunday, out Tuesday, because there may be some snow or something coming through there on Tuesday. I want to be well out of Dodge by the time that comes. But yeah, I will be in Atlanta visiting, FanFest, College Football Hall of Fame, kind of just everything that's in that little footprint of Atlanta. I'm really, really excited. This may be the only time in my life that I get to in person see an Ohio State national championship. Of course, I do remember the conclusion to the 2014 season. I was I'm going to turn a lot of people off here. I was just a little bit too young to remember 02. I'm really excited. It's kind of a cap, one-time only deal to my road to CFB travels. It doesn't count toward any stadiums or anything like that. But yeah, I will be in a ATL this weekend or MLK Day for the national championship.
You say that as in this is going to be your last hurrah, and I promise you, it won't be because I know you, and B, I could give you, from my personal experience, after just getting married over the summer, and I'm already thinking about ways to bring it up, about whether it's X college basketball game or X road trip that I want to go on at some point. It's a never-ending cycle, one way or the other, too.
Well, I'll still be going to games. I just don't know if I'm going to make it to a specific Ohio State in the national championship because I'm over in Ohio, so it's also on the eastern side of the country. They play in LA, they play in Las Vegas, they play all over. Even Miami's a lot further. This is like outside like Lucas Oil. This is really the only chance that I'll get to like really drive and go see them for now.
I think the key that's fair. I think the key for both of us is it's not marriage, is what I've learned. It's once you have kids.
Yeah.
Once the kids come into play, then you're truly
that's
toast.
It. Yeah,
right. So I think you have a couple more trips in you because the Buckeyes certainly, knock on wood for yourself, I could care less, but I don't think this is their last championship.
About every 5 years, if we're doing averages, is about
right.
when they make it. So it's
have
possible,
kids.
But yeah. I mean, if you look at the average price of this game, though, that this truly could be the last time. So it's turning into a Super Bowl ticket
for sure. I hope you have a great time, man. Hope you win your bets. If you want to hit Brett up, or because you'll be there, Monday morning, I'm assuming?
I'll be there I'm getting to like the area at like 9 a.m., probably even a little bit earlier than that. And the gates don't open until 4:30. I probably won't be going in until closer to 6. So yeah, I'll be around. I don't think there's anybody out there that wants to meet and greet, but if you see me or whatever, stop me and say hello. But yeah, I will be there.
You could find him on X at Road to CFB. Hit him up there. You can follow me on X at Eli Herskovich. Be sure to read Brett's column and all of his great work. A bunch of different pieces up, including the biggest underdogs, which he touched on from the get-go on this show, to ever win the national championship, or at least over the last couple decades. Check that out over at thelines.com. And make sure to give the video a thumbs up, leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast. So for Brett, at Road to CFB on X, and for myself, Eli Herskovich, thanks for watching and listening to the finale of Beat the Closing Number, College Football Edition-wise, here on YouTube or on Apple or Spotify or your favorite podcast app. So long, everybody.
Thank you, by the way. Before we completely sign off, thank you to everybody that's followed along this season. It's been amazing. Can't wait to get the offseason work done. But thank you to everybody that's taken the time out of their day to listen to us talk about college football.
Absolutely. And thank you to Brett for all of his hard work throughout the season. Really fun to do the show with you, man. So for the second time, for Brett, for myself, Eli Herskovich, so long, everybody, and good luck with your college football picks.